very, very important. As I said earlier, issues surrounding the lives of women are issues that need to be treated as a national concern or as a national issue. I mean, as I said earlier, when you breeze into town, you ask people how they feel about independence. I mean, there's a lot of mixed reactions and so on and so forth. The points from which I want us to have our conversation will be whether or not we are truly independent after 67 years. We find ourselves in a country that is blessed with the vast majority of resources, but what is happening? The resources of Ghana used to be called the Gold Coast because of the fact that Ghana is rich in minerals such as gold, bauxite, diamond, name them, manganese, name them, so on and so forth, which is also the story of the African continent in its entirety. But what you find is that the wealth of the country is being exploited not for the benefit of the ordinary Ghanaian citizens like you and I, but only for a select few who continue to benefit, and we continue to suffer as working class people and ordinary Ghanaian citizens. So are we truly independent after 67 years? That's a question I think all of us should ask ourselves. We find ourselves as a country going back to institutions, Bretton Woods institutions like the International Monetary Fund. How many years has it been? I mean, how many times has it been since Ghana has gone to the IMF? I think 17 times. Last year made it the 17th time since Ghana went to the IMF for bailouts to sort of turn around its economic fortunes. And the operators of these Bretton Woods institutions somewhat are those who put us through a lot of torture back then. They put our forebears through a lot of torture, under the slave trade and under colonialism and so on and so forth. Yet again, we find ourselves going to knock on their doors every now and then to ask for loan after mismanagement by the people that we put in place to steer the affairs of our very dear nation, Ghana. Are we truly independent after 67 years? I don't think that we are self-reliant, because if we were, we will not be going or falling on the IMF every now and then that we are in crisis. And what the IMF does is to actually bring about conditionalities, which are usually conditionalities that affect ordinary Ghanaian citizens or working class people like you and I. They'll tell you cut down on your public service wages, cut down on employment, cut down on this and cut down on that. The people that we put in place up there, they do not feel this. You and I are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this failed system that we are operating as a country. Yet again, I ask, are we truly independent after 67 years? I'm sure a lot of you have some contributions and submissions that you'd like to make on the question about whether or not we are truly independent, irrespective of the successes that some people think that we may have chalked. So when you get to mount this platform, you talk about what you think, as comrades engaged in the struggle. I mean, we can talk about, the soaring inflation that we are witnessing. It's been just how many months into 2024 have we seen the number of labor front agitations? Have we seen the number of labor front agitations? The Health Service Workers Union are agitating and crying. Teachers Workers Union are agitating and crying. What are they asking for? Something as basic as better conditions of service. And every now and then when this comes up, they go into consultations with the government and negotiations here and there. They lay down their tools, government convinces them to go back to work, but nothing really happens. We go back to square one. Are we truly independent as a country? Until we are able to solve the challenges that affect you and I as ordinary Ghanaian citizens, we will continue to struggle and ensure that we overcome the system that keeps oppressing us as ordinary Ghanaian citizens of this country. I'm not sure if any of you use the Abelempe route that houses the Canadian Visa Application Center. Did any of you use that side when you were coming? Okay. Have you seen the number of people there, trying to, leave the shores of Ghana and probably the shores of the continent in search of bread and butter and milk and honey? Those like you and I who should know better and should actually be the torchbearers of our African brothers and sisters, given the fact that we were the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to have attained independence from British colonial rule. But is that what we are witnessing? I don't think so. Can you blame them entirely for the fact that they are living or they are leaving or crisscrossing the continent in search of milk and honey and bread and butter? I don't think you can, because it is as a result of the failed system that we are operating, the failed system that keeps oppressing us. We have students coming out of school and they cannot get access to employment. That is our reality as a Ghanaian people, 67 years after independence. So it dawns on you and I to, have the conversation about whether or not we are truly independent. If we are not able to tackle these issues, and I don't think any of you can hit your chest and stand and say that Ghana is truly independent. We do recall that on the Polo Grounds on the 6th of March in 1957, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said that Ghana, our beloved country, is free forever. I'll keep asking, are we truly free? Well, I do not think that is the case. I'm not sure how Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah will be feeling in his grave today, being 67 years after he led the independence struggle, in 1957 and so on. I mean, one of the quotes that I find very inspiring from Osajifo will be that the independence of Ghana is meaningless until it's linked to the total liberation of the African continent. And also, what he said about the fact that Ghana's independence is meaningless if we are not economically free or economically independent. But we are not. The massive industrialization that we saw at the time, there was a spring up. I mean, Osajifo's vision sprang up of a lot of factories at the time. The glass factory, the shoe factories, the Komenda sugar factory, which has now become what it has become. A lot of these factories, because Osajifo believed that Ghana can only be independent if it is economically independent. But I don't think any of the successive governments have been able to achieve Osajifo's vision and dreams and aspirations of ensuring that no Ghanaian is left behind. Let us even talk basically about the issue about, access to basic necessities of life. When I say basic necessities of life, I mean food, potable water, access to quality education, access to quality healthcare, and so on and so forth. I am a reporter and I go on field almost all the time, and when you go to a place like Manchadona, Bese, Chokwe, and these places, on a working week between the hours of 8 and probably 10 and 12, where students or children of school going age should be in school, you find a large number of them at the game centers, at the football pitch, and so on and so forth, playing. And when you have conversations with them as to why they are not in school, they will tell you that my mother tells me she does not have money today, and so I can't go to school. That is the reality of the Ghanaian people today. The people that we put up there, they cannot relate to our stories. You know why? Their families are given access to quality healthcare off of the shores of Ghana. They are flying their families and their children out there for access to quality education. They go to the best of colleges. They go to the best of the Ivy League institutions. What do you and I get? Crumbs. Forget about the free that they talk about half of the time. It is not our reality as a Ghanaian people. The average Ghanaian woman sitting in Makola somewhere cannot afford to put food on the table. People have phone formations these days. I don't know if you know about that. There's a 100, there's a 011, there's even 000, where people don't have anything to eat at all. 100 means you take breakfast, lunch, dinner denied, access denied. 011 means you don't take breakfast, you take lunch and then you take dinner. That is when you are, privileged enough. And 000 means that you don't have anything to eat at all. This is our reality as a Ghanaian people after 67 years of independence. How then do we hit our chest and say that Ghana is truly free? So, this is a part that gets me a bit emotional every now and then, but we know that around 24.2% of the Ghanaian population lives below the poverty line. That is our reality as a Ghanaian people. Just somewhere last week, it was announced that transport fares are expected to go up again. Fuel prices are skyrocketing here and there. Inflation is soaring here and there. And you and I are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this failed system. As I said earlier, the people that we put up there cannot relate to our stories. Basically by virtue of the fact that they live in a world of their own. So in their heads, they mount platforms and they'll tell you that the system is working. Is the system working? You and I know that it is not. So this really, truly is our reality as a Ghanaian people. I could go on and on and on, but I'm sure a lot of you will raise some of the things that I haven't talked about. But at this point, I want us to link this conversation to the position of women in the socio-economic and political histories of Ghana. And to help us do that, I want to take us back to the colonial era. What happened at that time, because really this issue that women face, the fact that we are not, our contributions and the roles that we played are sometimes often downplayed, stems from somewhere. The fact that our rights are taken away from us and so on stems from somewhere. So I want us to look at the situation then during the colonial era. Now, the industrialization of the colonial government at the time denied both men and women a lot of their rights. A lot of their rights were taken away from them, in so much so that both men and women could not vote. They could not exercise their franchise. Both men and women had very limited access to education. They had limited access to, employment, and they could not stand for political positions at the time. But because of the, spring up of a lot of institutions, the labor that was required to manage and run these institutions saw the British colonial leaders bringing education down to the indigents. What did they do? What they did was to opt to train the male population over their female counterparts, and this sort of engendered or contributed to the class difference that we see today, because those who had gone through the colonial schools were rewarded and given them an added advantage over those that hadn't, or an added political advantage over those that hadn't. And all of those that had gone through the colonial education system were men. And all of that as well. So I would say that all of this started from somewhere. Eventually, when the women were allowed any form or access to education, can any of you guess what education they were given? The subjects that these women were taught in school was how to manage the home, as compared to their male counterparts who had education that was required, or training that was required, to actively engage in full-fledged political activism. This is where some of the issues started from, our rights being taken away from us, and the fact that the male population was put above the female, because the British opted to train them and then give women training that had to do with managing the home and so on and so forth. But eventually some women got the access to education even abroad. I could talk about the likes of the Mabel Ellendorf Danquez and the Evelyn Mansa Amate Fuse, who got education off of the shores of Gold Coast, which made them become a lot more politically conscious and politically aware of the situation at the time. And what did they do with this education that they had gained? What they did was to come back to the Gold Coast to mobilize and organize the women, so much so that they could also carry along with them those who had little to no education at all at the time. And this was very important because it gave women a certain self-consciousness or political consciousness of the situation in the Gold Coast at the time. There were also the formations of certain, should I call them elitist or bourgeois women's group, who were not passive and whose existence sought to reform the existing indigenous and colonial patriarchy and so on and so forth. So you see that despite these challenges that women faced, they played a very significant role in our independence struggle. They featured prominently in the independence struggle, pre-colonial Ghana, post-colonial Ghana, through to independence. We can talk about in 1948 when Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was arrested alongside some leaders of the United Gold Coast Convention. You and I know that it took the likes of Hannah Kujo to organize women, to rally on the streets, organize large rallies to demand and agitate for the release of Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. How then do we downplay, the efforts and the contributions of women, in Ghana's independence struggle? And we do know and understand that Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah himself was a promoter of women's rights. He instituted the affirmative action, which saw the election of some 10 women into parliament at the time. This he was able to achieve through the representation of the People's Amendments Bill, which he instituted when he realized that parliament was made up of males, only men, who were making decisions that bordered around the lives of both men and women. So then he realized that there was a need to have women also in parliament, because sometimes there are certain very peculiar issues that had to do with women. For instance, in recent times we've been talking a lot about the removal of taxes on menstrual hygiene products in our present. Who is better suited to tell the stories of the feminine side than a feminine voice? So we can look at all of that. All of this that I'm saying just seeks to bring your minds or to the fact that women have always been there, significantly playing roles that ensured that Ghana had its liberation, or Ghana was free from colonial rule, from pre-colonial Ghana, post-colonial Ghana, through to independence. And I would say that women were actively involved in building the nation's nationalistic sentiments from the 1950s through to independence. Let me now bring the conversation to our now, where we are at today. And what I would say is that although the Fourth Republic is sort of witnessing an increase in the number of women's participation in the socio-economic development of our dear nation Ghana, the numbers and the substance still remains very, very low. For instance, Article 17, Clause 1 and 2 of the 1992 Constitution guarantees, women their rights, both men and women freedom from any form of discrimination on the basis of economic or social tangents. But is that really a reflection of our lives today? I don't think that it is, because there are lots of organizations that you go to and find out that women and men who are doing the same jobs, we have men being better remunerated than their female counterparts. This is where we are as a people. And it breaks my heart almost all the time when we talk about issues like this and decide not to look at how tremendously women have contributed to our growth and our socio-economic development as a nation. Why is that the case? I mean, the socio-political prejudices against Ghanaian women sort of creates an asymmetrical relationship where the weak or the minority continues to be subordinated and their rights denied them or taken away from them. Rights which could actually transform certain existing power-based ideologies. And why is this happening? It's happening based on the fact that we live in a very society whose gender dynamics are, a certain way. So much so that certain traditional and cultural practices sort of hold women back from being able to identify, from being able to achieve their full potential. And that is as a result of the very typically patriarchal society that we find ourselves in today. What does patriarchy do? I'm not quite sure we have the time to talk about what patriarchy is and so on, but we all know that patriarchy sort of puts a certain, group above the other. In patriarchy or under patriarchy, the role of a woman is paired with the societal expectations that she acts as a homemaker and a caretaker. How then do we expect them to actively involve themselves in, these conversations as and when they come up? We cannot have this conversation also without talking about the political forces that have shaped the interest, for instance, the ambitions of women, as well as their self-determination as women. Let me take us back to the year 2020, the political season. We had one of the major political parties in Ghana picking a woman as the running mate to the flag bearer at the time. A lot of us were engaged in debates and discussions about this and so on and so forth. Those on the opposing end thought that this woman was chosen out of tokenism. And if you know what tokenism is when a certain somebody is chosen based on the fact that she belongs to a certain minority group. So what the people on the opposing end actually thought was that this woman was chosen out of tokenism to appeal to the women to get their vote and so on and so forth. But have we seen the portfolio of this woman? Have we seen who she is? A woman who was able to lead an entire ministry, a woman who served as the first female vice chancellor of a public university in Ghana. Are we saying that she was not capable of, if the party had won, being the leader of Ghana's economic management team? I'm not quite sure that was the case. But if it will take tokenism for us as women to be put in positions, then why not? If we refuse to value us based on our abilities and capabilities as humans, then we are failing as a people. Our collective humanity is at stake if we refuse to value peoples based on their abilities and capabilities and not based on their gender. There needs to be a reorientation of the next generation of boys and girls to ensure that we are telling them that you should raise people based on what they are able to do and not based on the fact that they are women or men. That is how come sometimes when we mount these platforms, we become very passionate. You tell us that, you women are too emotional. Look, we live in a gendered society, and what this gendered society is doing is dictating to us how to feel about things, because there are a lot of men walking out there who are depressed. But society tells you that, you cannot show emotions. That is the situation that we find ourselves in. So we need to all become active promoters of women's rights, because we are failing as a people if we do not become promoters of women's rights. And women's rights and issues bothering around the life of women are issues that should concern all of us. How then do we have this conversation without talking about the likes of women who have led revolutions, the Titina Sealers who led the Guinean revolution alongside the likes of Amilcar Cabral? How then do we not talk about the likes of Winnie Madikizela, who played an active role in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa? How then do we not talk about the likes of the Assata Shakurus, who with the Black Liberation Army led black people to demand for their rights? This is where we are as a people. Even for instance in Ghana, the likes of Rebecca Nadide Ashton, who is now celebrated on the 50 pesos coin, the role she played actively supporting the vision of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So comrades and friends, I'll bring my first submission here to a close. I'm sure a lot of you have T's to help me cross and I's to help me dot. But let us all become active promoters of the rights of women, because our collective humanity as a people is at stake if we refuse to do so. Thank you.
Well, we had Comrade Makiza Latifa and raised a number of very interesting issues. Unfortunately for us, we are running against time, and so we're going to be rushing. First of all, we're going to come to the studio and ask for comments, questions, and so on from the studio. So if you have a question to raise, if you have a comment to make, simply just put up your hand. Studio audience. Hands up. I see 1, I see 2, I see 3, and I see 4. So we'll have 4 comments and questions from the studio audience, and this is how it's going to go. We're going to start from you, and then you, and you, and you. And then we'll move to the social media platforms. Because we don't have a lot of time, please be brief.
Good evening, comrades, home and abroad, wherever you are. I appreciate you. In fact, the topic of today is discussed in detail by our discussant. I've finished everything and open rows for. I just have a question, and that question is very simple, but it is for women. I first of all want to congratulate Ghana for 67 years. No matter how far they have gone, have freedom is better than none. You know, what they did 67 years ago is what we are doing today. As a Biafran, I'm also struggling to see that we determine our future. So I think the problem with the freedom not being complete today, because as she said that political freedom is not complete without economic freedom, and that is the problem here. It's simple because the vision of our forefathers, the foundation fathers like Osagyefo Nkrumah, is deviated if they has followed their vision. At least by now, a country like Ghana will be like when you talk of one of the Asia tigers, South Korea, the rest of them. Or they all started journey at the same time. But reverse is the case because of visionless leaders that start from where he stopped. Again, it's about women equity. Some women, they don't support their own. That's the problem. So my question here is, how is today women will rally up their own? It's very, very important to activate the consciousness that when, like, if a woman is picked today as a vice president of any political party, other women will see it as oh, this is our own. We want her to be there. With a lot of women, they don't support their own. So what are the plans on the ground to make sure that this time you appreciate your own. Thank you very much.
Good evening, comrades. First of all, I will say that Nkrumah never dies. As a young man, today I feel happy and sad at the same time. I feel happy because today is a great day in Ghana's history. But when I remember the 1966 coup, then I become very sad that a visionary like Kwame Nkrumah was betrayed in that manner. In fact, it is very, very sad. Let's look at the political leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, a man who was writing a book, New Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. Africa must unite. Oh, that is so great. But today, what do we have? What do we have in our political leadership? Now people are doing the Japadie and so on. So you can see the difference. The difference is clear. In fact, no grave can bury the legacy of Kwame Nkrumah. And when I say grave, it includes those who are trying to rewrite the history of Ghana. Nobody can rewrite the history of Ghana. What they are doing, they will be swept into the dustbin of history. Now, finally, I remember Kwame Nkrumah trying to help Transvolta Togoland to be integrated to the Gold Coast. But today, what do we have? In the 1950s, but today what do we have? I come from the Guan district in the Oti region, and we don't have a voice in parliament, no parliamentarian. So you can see the difference under this leadership. But they are talking about freedom and justice, economic, political independence without economic self-sufficiency is symbol without substance. We have the symbol, but where is the substance? Only the right political leadership will take us to the promised land.
Thank you so much, Comrade Makiza, for that insightful discussion. I think oftentimes when we mount platforms or when we talk about the rights of women, we seem to have that the sentiment, and it's sort of like men against women, or even just like our comrade rightly asked, some women stand against the others. Mostly it's very important that we first of all identify as humans or human beings, so humanity comes first, and we should never put aside the issue of class, because women, even they are not a homogeneous body. We are being disintegrated along the lines of race and so many other things. So first of all, we must always bear in mind that there is a class struggle that is being forged, or that is being fought all the time. So until we are able to bring that balance in the society where each human being is taken out of oppression, then the issue of women will always be swept under the carpet. And it's been several years that women have faced some of these issues, and basically because of the patriarchal system that we find ourselves in, which is funding the capitalist system that we find ourselves in. The work that women do at home that funds this whole capitalist system is something that we all as humanity must stand to fight against. So oftentimes when we talk about women's rights and all that, it's not that we are saying it in a paradoxical manner to make it seem like it's our rights or so, but it's right that humanity all have to fight for. Thank you.
Good evening, comrades. Thank you, Makiza, for the great presentation. I think you made a good point with the contribution of women in attaining independence. Most of the time when we are talking about independence, we talk about the men and don't talk about the contribution of women. It's important for us to note that even the women in the informal sector, the women in Makola and the big markets contributed a lot massively to the attainment of independence. Fast forward, Ghana is 67 years, but women are still paying taxes on their sanitary product. Fast forward, Ghana is 67 years, and when a girl is raped, she would have to pay to be examined by a doctor. These are the things that are pulling women from going forward and working hard. Look, women need support. Women go through reproductive rights. You go through that, you have 3 months of leave. After that, what happens to your baby? We don't have good working conditions for working women, people who have babies, and these are the conversations we should have. Yes, Ghana is 67 years, but we would have to do more to promote women's rights. Thank you.
Well, just an announcement first. The Women's Wing of the Socialist Movement of Ghana will be observing International Women's Day under the broad theme, the inclusion of women in the national development effort, this Friday at the headquarters of the Socialist Movement of Ghana at 4 p.m. And the speakers will be Ama Pratt, Loretta Nade Ashi, and Madam Ayele of the TUC, the spokesperson of the TUC. Nade Ayele will also be there, to do a presentation. So we're urging all of you, women's activists, we're urging all of you, progressive activists, we're urging all of you, members of the collectives of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, to join us, to join the Women's Wing of the Socialist Movement of Ghana in observing this day next Friday at 4 p.m. at the headquarters of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. Now my pleasure to bring to the microphone Loretta Nade Ashi, who is the leader of the Women's Wing of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. Her task is very simple. Just a few messages from social media, and then we can draw down the curtains.
Okay, good evening once again. This is from Adam Alassan, and he says, Ghana is not independent because America, France, Europe are still controlling Africa. The imperialist colonial masters did not only subvert our development of our country, they hindered on the human rights of our people. True female rights and human rights have always been championed by progressive forces. Can't wait to be at the SMG headquarters on Friday for SMG's International Women's Day celebration. This is from Ibrahim Bada. Ghana beyond aid under President Akufo-Addo, but he is afraid to sign the LGBTQ+ bill. That's from Kakra Beidu. Let's go to WhatsApp, and it says, it's important to highlight the fact that women are the majority in this country. From Abdullah Zakaria in Tamale. And someone also wants to know why women are their own enemies. So comment, that's all we have for you.
Well, at this stage we invite Makiza Latifa to make a few comments to close us this evening. Makiza Latifa.
Okay, I'm sure that we don't have much time, and so I'll box everything that I have to say in just like 2 minutes and so on. All I'll say is that we need to come to a realization that when we mount platforms to talk about issues concerning women, it is not a fight against the men. We need you to understand that it is a fight against the system that keeps oppressing women and girls, that keeps taking from them their voice to be able to speak without fear or favor. That is what we are fighting for. We are fighting to get our rights, and we are fighting and demanding for better treatment. To be treated in dignity or with dignity, because we are failing as a people if we continue to, for instance, tax period poverty, period products. We are failing as a people if we continue to have situations where both men and women who work in the same organization or institution, we have men being remunerated better than the women. We are failing if we do not fight against female genital mutilation, for instance. We are failing if we do not fight against child marriages, and we are failing if we just sit down, fold our arms, or stand akimbo without talking about all of these issues. I will just leave it right here because we do not have enough time. But thank you all for listening to us. Please come to the headquarters of the Socialist Movement of Ghana on Friday so that we can continue the conversations there at exactly 4 p.m. It promises to be exciting and very educative, and would have the opportunity to further elaborate on some of the points that we've raised, because we do not have time to do it all today. Thank you very kindly for listening to me. And as we leave here today, let us all become promoters of the rights of women, because if we do not, then our collective humanity will continue to be at stake as a people. Thank you.
Well, somehow Makiza has drawn the curtain already. The curtain is drawn down. The program has come to an end. But I'd just like to say that Pan-African television is like no other television. You get the best on Pan-African television. So please keep your dial on Pan-African television until we meet again next time. It's always Pan-African television because we give you the best. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.